Well,
Mhm.
Hannah, it's so good to be with you. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
My pleasure. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. We're very excited about this book, the latest publishing offering from Faith Matters. Faith Matters does not publish a lot of books, um, so I think that tells you something about what we believe about this and what the organization does. It's a really beautiful book. Your writing is beautiful, your insights are beautiful, and aesthetically, it's beautiful too. I think we should maybe shout out Cole Mellinson, our fearless designer.
Yeah, he
Um,
did a great job.
he really did. And one of the metaphors that when you pick up the book, that you'll see immediately is shells. They're on the cover. They're throughout the book. Would you mind introducing the shell metaphor to us right now and
Yeah,
just tell
yeah.
us a little bit about it?
So here it is, just hot off the press right here.
Yes.
So we've got some shells on the front cover, but basically I frame it as a walk on the beach, and I can pick up things that I find that are beautiful, that are meaningful to me. And I think looking back over different life experiences and things like that, there are moments where have felt that um, I have felt like I've been a participant in grace, and that it's this collaborative moment with God, and I find these moments very beautiful, and so I've collected them in this book and over my life, and so that's why it's kind of framed that way as a shell collection. So then each chapter has one of those shells, and so overall it's a collection. So
Yeah, I like the way that you phrased that, that you felt like a participant in grace. Um, that I think that's maybe an unusual, in some ways, way of looking at grace, and it speaks to also the title of the book, Gracing,
mhm.
in which you sort of turn grace into a verb.
Mhm.
Would you mind talking about that idea a little bit?
Yeah, yeah. So I think a lot of us have had the idea that grace is something that, if we look at a timeline, grace is something that kicks in somewhere later. And it's a gift that's given to us from God and it helps us go to heaven someday. But I think grace is actually at the same point in the timeline. It's right now. And it isn't something that just comes from God to us, but it's something that we participate in. And it's this collaborative process. And I feel like a lot of different religions have different words for this, and different ideas about what this means and what it looks like. But it seems to me like a lot of religions are pointing to this kind of idea that grace is now, and and it is a way of being. It's a verb. It's not just something that comes downloaded from heaven. Um, so I think it was an important shift for me in understanding grace. And I think a lot of it had to do with reading some of Adam Miller's work. I'm a big fan of that, and and the ways that grace shows up. And so as I was writing the book, I was trying to figure out, what is this thing? Um, what's the word for it? I think covenant kind of comes close, but we often talk about um, keeping our covenants,
Mhm.
plural, instead of living in covenant. But I think that living in covenant is a way of being that I think relates to that idea of racing. So, yeah.
One of my very favorite parts of the book near the beginning is where you sort of talk about how you can live immersed in grace in whatever you're already doing. It's something we can feel while we're washing dishes or changing a diaper or like
Right.
walking a dog. I
Mhm.
love the idea that grace is something that can fill your life in the nitty gritty, like in the dirty jobs.
Mhm.
And there's this one line that maybe is my favorite of the book where you say that when you find the path that combines our energy, our experience, our education, and our desire, then grace breaks through in ways that help us to enact those callings in meaningful ways. And that was exciting to me because I definitely relate to this feeling of existential overwhelm about all the things that I'm not doing that I could be doing, like things I'm not reading and I could be reading. It
Mhm.
feels like there's always there's just an endless list of other lives that we could be living. And I loved just this reminder that because of our embodiment, we're going to live these very specific lives, and we're going to have to be specialized. We're going to have to use our very particular gifts and minds and bodies and situation in life to find grace and to live out this calling.
Right, right. And I feel like that idea has kind of helped maybe blur the lines between a religious life and a regular life, and that they don't have to be that different. And if I'm in the mindset, like, oh, I need to read my scriptures, and so kids, go away,
Right.
don't bug me, don't bother me. Instead of living in such a way that I respond to my children, and sometimes it may be, give me 5 minutes while I'm working on this, and then we can, talk about what you need to talk about. But it's not compartmentalized. It's a life that's not compartmentalized, that I'm in work right now. Now I'm in mom mode and putting on my different hats and everything. But it just flows from one into the next. And it seems to me like everything that we do can be lived in that kind of flow, that kind of caring, loving way. And I liken it a little bit to the body of Christ, where we've got, different cells in our bodies that are doing different jobs. And if one of them, was to say, I'm the most important, we don't need anybody else here, then that would obviously be problematic. But we need people who are thinkers, people who are doers, people who change diapers, people who feed other people, and all of those jobs are needed. And even still within our own lives, we have those different jobs that we're doing at different times. And so I really resonate with that idea that it doesn't have to be this holy, set apart life. It's whatever we're doing, we can do in a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how does it, energetically, how does that feel different? Where when something is a bother and feels like the obstacle to you feeling connection versus just, maybe it's just a matter of presence. I don't know. How would you describe the difference between those two ways of being?
Yeah, I think presence is a big part of it. I think love is a part of it. I think there's a certain energy, I would want to say, in living in a way that is connected with other people and with ideas and with things. It's not a separated kind of cut off life. And I think, you could almost look at any of those things that we're maybe quote unquote supposed to be doing, where you read your scriptures, for example, and you're just going through the motions, you're not getting much out of it. But then there's also a different way where you are engaged in it and you're getting insights from it. And that feels different. However, there are also a lot of times where you just feel like you're in practice, like you're doing something like reading, and you're really not getting anything out of it, but you have a different intention. I think intention is a big part of it, where you are searching for that kind of life, that kind of experience, rather than just doing it to, pat yourself on the back that you did this thing. So, and the same thing could be said in things that we don't think of as so religious, in an interaction with a child. If I am in that flow of grace with my child, there's a connection and a bond there, and an attentiveness that feels different than when I'm just, scrolling through my phone, that I do too much, or, just kind of checked out. My mind is elsewhere instead of with the person that's right in front of me.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's really beautiful.
What are this is bringing up a question for me, which is, I definitely resonate with what you're describing, those moments where I do feel like I'm a participant in grace. More often than not, I don't feel that way so much. Like I feel like I'm stressed or hurried, or a variety of other things that sort of like limit connection and limit that feeling that you're that and I don't know if feeling's the right word. I don't really like the word feeling, but like that
Mhm.
engagement with grace that you're describing. Have you, would you say over your life been able to feel like you've become more and more of a frequent participant in grace? And if so, what are the things that you think have led you there?
That's a good question. I think in certain ways it's changed because my roles have changed. When I had a bunch of littles at home, then so much of my time and energy was required there. So it looked different when I was actually um, engaged with my children versus not. And it required a lot more time and energy in my day. Now I just have one at home, and he's a teenager, and I don't see him as much. And so I feel like I'm trying to figure that out a little bit right now, like what it looks like. Um, and I've heard it said that a lot of times when people are writing a book that they have some kind of question that they're trying to answer or grapple with. And I think for me, it was something like, what does grace look like in my life right now? And so as far as like whether I've had more of those experiences now, I don't know, it's a little hard to quantify, but I do feel like it looks a little different now than it used to. But I'm still reaching for those types of moments.
Yeah,
So,
that makes
yeah.
sense. I think sometimes we maybe beat ourselves up too much for not feeling like participants in grace when we should be, and we feel like we like it should be happening all the time. And I do think
Mhm.
you're right. Like we've heard Richard Rohr talk about not just the first half of life and the second half of life, but lately he's been talking about the third half of life. And I
Mm.
wonder if we should give ourselves a little more grace, so to speak, in just sort of like there does seem to be a natural unfolding.
Mhm.
For example, the people that I interact with that seem like the fullest participants in grace do tend to be older.
Mm.
And I think there's just a general maturing that comes as we sort of move through those halves of life. And
Mhm.
I think young people who often are in sort of these more achiever oriented stages, we hear these ideas about grace, and we want to achieve living in grace.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and when we see ourselves falling short, we beat ourselves up. And I think sometimes maybe just patience, even over years and decades,
Yeah.
could be a virtue here.
Yeah, I like that. And I would agree with that. And there probably comes a point with maybe some more maturity and growth where when you're not having those moments in that experience, you just kind of notice it and maybe reorient yourself a little bit, but it's not a self-flagellation kind of a moment
Yeah.
where you're just saying, yeah, I'm messed up and there's no hope for me. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
just kind of oh, I'm over here and let's move over to here. Just
Mhm.
shift kind of the way I'm engaging, shift my intention a little bit. Just a recognition that we're a little off. So
Yeah. Will you do a reading from the creating chapter? This is one chapter that I loved so much. I'd love to just hear a little bit.
yeah, of course. Um, yeah, so this is the end of that chapter.
Okay.
I suspect our individual creative undertakings are not unlike God's creative process, despite the vast difference in scope and know-how. In the beginning, we are told, God moved upon the face of the waters, divided light from darkness, brought forth herb-yielding seed, set lights in the heavens, and created great whales and winged fowl and every creeping thing, using atoms from stars as his medium. The whole process required as much aesthetic sense as technical ability. Eventually, God's children were set on the earth with their own charge to create. Immersed in grace, God's people would follow suit. Moses would create a people chosen by God out of a people who frequently forgot him. Noah would create a refuge from the storm. Joseph of Egypt would create family reconciliation from estrangement. Esther would create a way to save her condemned people, as would Jesus. Isaiah would create prophetic poetry that would point to truth through all ages, and Peter and Paul would create community among a hodgepodge of Jews, Greeks, and Romans, all bound by a testimony of Jesus. In my own sphere, I occasionally emulate my creative heavenly parents, the ones who fashioned their grand creations from grass, pond scum, and stars. Immersed in grace, I gather orange construction paper, green grapes, Jesus Christ lizards, and whatever else I can find, recycling and repurposing the stuff of my little universe. I create a meaningful life from a jumble of days, order from chaos, light from darkness, and beauty from ashes. One day, I hope to find it all on God's fridge and proclaim that it was good.
I love that. Thank you so much. I
Beautiful.
want to just ask you, we have this idea that there are creative people who do artsy things, but it doesn't feel like that's exactly what you're talking about. So would you just say, how do you see creativity helping people feel alive, but also very connected in their own lives, if they don't even necessarily consider themselves, creative in that sense, in that artistic sense?
Yeah, I think it relates to that idea of that we all kind of have different ways of being, things that we're called to, things that we can do in this life. And sometimes our idea of like a covenant path can kind of narrow our vision on what a creative life looks like. I think Terrell and Fiona Given said something to the effect that it may be that our life is more like a canvas that we paint rather than a script that we need to learn, and we all have different mediums to work with. We have different bodies, we have different educational levels, different perspectives, and so there's different things that we can do with that, and we can create moments with our families. We can create good things in the work that we do, in the relationships that we have. All of those are creative enterprises. It's not just artsy. So yeah.
I just have to say my favorite thing about this whole idea is that it feels so far from a checklist. And you read that maybe Judgment Day is less of a, something like a courtroom and more about a God just being totally delighted in these moments of our lives, like hanging pictures up on the fridge. And I feel the most connected with God when I feel like maybe God is not weighing every action and deciding if I did it exactly right, but just is so delighted with what happened in that moment, like with what I did with all of with my particular soul and gifts and tools and weaknesses. Like this is what became of this moment, and maybe that delights God. So love this chapter.
Yeah. And I think as a parent too, you can see that with your own kids. You're not weighing everything to see if they earn something or not. You're just, when they do something wonderful, it's delightful, and you love to see it, and you hope that they do more of those kinds of creative things that light them up. So yeah.
Love that. I was curious about what do you think is the relationship between, like, obstacles and trials and hard things and grace? Because it seems to be a theme in the book that there are a lot of things that come up that they feel like obstacles. They feel like the thing that is the problem in your life, and that very often that seems to actually be this doorway into some sort of deeper connection. So I was curious if you thought about it, and if you think if it's necessary, like, is that part of this maturing process?
I don't know that I would have the same understanding about grace if it weren't for the obstacles that were in the way to access it. And that feels a little bit to me like, we talk about the purpose of this life to come here and face trials and things like that. But there does seem to be something about that, where maybe the people that are hard in your life, or the situations that you find yourself that are hard, it requires some wrestling to figure out, again, what grace looks like. What does it look like in this relationship with this person where we keep butting heads? What does it look like in a body that doesn't work the way that I want it to, where I can't do the things that I want it to, and those kinds of things. And so I think I think the trials serve as catalysts to that open us up to grace that we would not see otherwise. And maybe it's possible that people experience that without. I can't think that I really know any of those people.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and it doesn't necessarily fit with my own experience either. So
Would you be open to sharing a little bit more about what you just mentioned, having a body that doesn't always, I guess, cooperate or is not always what we would hope? I think
yeah.
I would love for you to, if you're open to it, you share some pretty personal experience in the book. If you wouldn't mind sharing some of that here, I think a lot of people resonate, and it can be such a health issues can be such a lonely pain, I think, for people who are experiencing it and simultaneously looking out at the world and seeing what appear to be a lot of healthy people, and it can feel very unfair.
Yeah.
And so for you to share, if you're open to it, no
Yeah.
pressure, a
Yeah,
little
of
bit of your
course.
experience.
Um, yeah, I explore that a little bit in my chapter called Wrestling, which is, I think, this process of, trying to figure out what it looks like. And I think in our church, it is very works oriented in the sense that we serve a lot and we do a lot and we are just busy with good things and helping each other and things like that. But it it's a life that is difficult for some people. And for me, I've got a couple of autoimmune illnesses, and there have been times in my life where I just had nothing, just this fatigue that was just dragging, and it just felt like I was, walking through the sea of jello everywhere that I went, and everything was just hard. And I had kids, and I wanted to be this energetic mom that would go out and play with them and take them places and go on hikes with them and all of these things, but my body wouldn't let me do it. And so I think that was definitely a part of my searching, I would say, to say, what does grace look like in this body that can't do the kinds of things that I would normally picture bodies being able to do, and especially like people that are doing things in the quote unquote right way, that are the good moms, that are the ones that are, taking their kids places and doing all these fun things with them. And I wanted that, but I couldn't have it. So I needed to shift the way I saw things a little bit.
I was so glad that you kind of opened up about that because I felt like on some level, everybody probably has had that experience, on the spectrum. And I was left thinking about after that chapter is the way that sort of directs your work to do. In a way, your body was sort of showing you what was yours. And so you had to sort of unchoose a lot of things, but also that was a direction. It pointed you to what you should be doing. And I think you wrote about that in such a generous way. And it was clear that you've metabolized a lot of this pain and are able to really look at this with some circumspection that felt really healthy. But we've never done an episode on chronic pain. I would love for you to just talk to people who are really struggling with this. Like when you're just dealing with the disappointment and the fear, I'm sure, about not knowing what your life should look like because you probably don't have a model, because I think this is a quiet struggle. It's not something that you can see without being in deep relationship with someone who's also in this fight. And I'd love for you to just talk about what you do when you're in the darkest part of that season in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a great question, and it's hard. And I wish I had easy solutions and easy answers. It's really not an easy place to be, in particular, when it's something that's invisible to other people.
Yeah.
Talk about invisible illness, where there are things that you deal with that people can't see, and they have certain expectations for you. And I think there are also, because it's invisible to other people, sometimes it's invisible to yourself as well, where you have this kind of back and forth in your head about, yeah, I could try a little harder. I could do this hard thing, but then you might spend a couple days just, you know, flat on your back because you did something that was too hard in that moment. Or there are other times when you need the message, okay, it's okay to pull back and it's okay to rest and do the kinds of things that I need to do. So it's those two, that dichotomy, that polarity where you've got works and grace, like try a little harder or give yourself a little break. And I think from day to day, the answer to that is going to be different. And so for me, I think the more I want to say still the voices that I have about, yeah, you can do it, or telling me the things that I should do, and just really try to be more aware of where my body is at in that moment, and just say, okay, this is the thing that I can do right now, or this is the thing that I need to take a break on this thing. So it requires a lot of patience and listening to yourself in a way that nobody else can tell you. Nobody else can have the correct answer for you in that particular moment. You know, sometimes I've seen little social media videos or something with somebody that's running a race, and they have a prosthetic or something like that, and then it says, "What's your excuse?" And those are frustrating for me, because I think people have different reasons that they can't do those kinds of things, so that you get a lot of that kind of messaging from the world. I think that you should be able to do this thing if you try harder, and you believe it sometimes too. And so yeah, I just think that if there is ever a way to kind of navigate those different voices, it's a real learning to listen to what your body needs from moment to moment. And it's not an easy task. I still struggle with that. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. There's a line that you mentioned from C.S. Lewis that I had never heard before, but I love it so much. And it's something like, the good as it ripens becomes more different from not just evil, but also from other good. And I think you mentioned it early in the book, but it kept coming back to me throughout this chapter about chronic illness, because it felt like that was sort of what you were saying, that like in some way your life was sort of being differentiated in a particular way that is also good and also different from other good that you see out in the world. And it just felt like that was a constant call in the book to just ask the way your life is going to be differentiated from other good, and just feeling more peace about the way your life will be different, considering considering your body and considering your circumstances. And that just, it really resonated with me on a deep level. And I think just because I think that's very true. It's very true that of course there is something particular for us to do, and we have all of the tools that we need, including our pain and things that will sort of guide us forward in uncomfortable ways.
Yeah, for sure. I remember there was a period in my life I was kind of looking for examples from movies or books of people that lived well with chronic illness, and it was really hard to do. I mean, there's a lot of examples of people that are that just whine a lot, that they complain about all of their aches and pains, or there's people that are angry, and yeah, there's not a lot of models for how to live well with it. And so yeah, it's interesting.
Has your experience, have you grappled with a lot of fear and uncertainty? Aubrey alluded to this a little bit, around what might happen in the future with your health. And have you come up with any answers to that particular issue outside of the health itself, but like the worry about, am I going to get better, or is this going to, end in catastrophe for me somehow?
Yeah, there is. And I think even more than where it's going to end up, because there is a lot of variability on where it ends up, but it's how I'm going to be able to do the things that I want to do even now.
Mm.
Um, and so it's tricky to be in a place where you're deciding, do I keep trying to do what I can to get well, which for anybody in that space, they recognize that there's so much that you could do. You could see all of these different doctors and naturopaths. You could experiment with your diet and with your exercise and all, and it really can be this kind of all-consuming uh, marathon to try to figure it out. And some people are in that way of searching for a long, long time, and it's hard. And every now and then I'll kind of go back to that area of searching, but I think more and more I'm feeling like there are certain things that won't change. I think about the AA Serenity Prayer quite a bit. Where they're, recognizing the things that you can change and the wisdom to kind of know the difference between the things that you can change and the things that you can't. And recognizing that that the way of life for me dealing with this thing is I don't want to be rushing around trying to figure out what's wrong, because I will not be able to live the life that I want to live right now. And if I'm always searching for the next thing, the miracle cure, then I will miss out on what's in front of me. And I know that people are at different places when it comes to that question, when to keep pushing for answers and when to just say, okay, I'm done for a little while, and there will be ups and downs. But I think it's okay to say, I'm not going to search for a while, I'm going to take a year off and just focus on other things. And I think that's completely legitimate. So, yeah.
Could I ask one question sort of on behalf of anyone listening that is a loved one of someone that is dealing with chronic illness or chronic pain? What, in your experience, what has been most helpful from either partners or loved ones as you've gone through these challenges?
I think sometimes the question, how are you, can feel like a really loaded question. And I don't really know how to answer it a lot of times. But if you can reframe it to say something like, how are you today? Then that is one little shift, like what's been a good thing about today? What's been hard about today? Because it's too big of a question. You want to say, well, I don't know how to answer that. I don't want to be in this negative place all the time, but yeah, my body is generally not in a great place. And so yeah, just that kind of phrasing can be helpful. Probably a lot of patience as far as if people are showing up to events or not, to understand that it's that their level of commitment, they might commit to something and then they have to back out, and they might not know when they can or can't be there. And so just to have some patience and understanding about that can be helpful as well. To give people outs as well, to just say, if did you need a ride home? Do are you doing okay right now? Just kind of questions like that, just to see where they're at and how they can get out if they need to. Yeah.
Wow.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. I wondered if your experience with chronic illness, if that is part of you write so beautifully about LGBTQ issues in the church. And I wondered if maybe this experience of just of never being totally understood, probably because this is lots going on all the time and it's changing every day. Like, has that helped you? I just wondered how that has informed the way you think about LGBTQ issues, because I felt like what was so powerful about this whole section is the way you really challenge people who feel like there's a problem. I feel like you really challenged us all to 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 say, like, but what are you going to do about it? Are you putting off someone else's pain because it's not yours, and trusting with a lot of faith that it's going to work out later? And can we really do that? And there's really this call to say, and you say, we have to be part of the solution right now. We can't just keep saying someone will take care of your pain eventually. God will fix this later.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's an interesting observation. I do feel like my experience with this does help me understand that everybody has something that is hard, and that there are groups like LGBTQ groups within our church who they're not being cared for in the ways that they need. And I think it's as much a theological problem as it is a care kind of a problem, that we have to wrestle with our theology in a way that that holds a place for them here, because so many are don't feel like they have a place here. And so you're right. I think that sense of not that sense of feeling a little different, or feeling like my experience is unlike other people's experience in some way, kind of helps me recognize that there are other people that are having a similar kind of experience over other issues. And I do have friends and family members who are in that place, and it's really hard. So
Do you see a way forward? I think it felt important to face the fact that, like, platitudes in this case are dangerous. Like, if we're trying to comfort ourselves so that we don't have to do anything uncomfortable to help, then
mhm.
that's really problematic. But I know there are so many people listening who are saying, who are thinking, I'm all in. Like, I love this place and I see a problem, but I don't see a way to contribute to a solution that's within my stewardship. And so there's just kind of this general discomfort and maybe like a real commitment to being inclusive in a personal way. But what, I mean, do you see a way forward institutionally, and knowing that you have the ear of a lot of people who are just feeling like, I don't know what to do, and I know there's a problem. Like, I see it, I feel it, and I don't know what to do.
Yeah, I don't necessarily have the answer, but what I've found that's interesting is that historically it seems like answers have come when enough people care about the problem.
Yeah.
And even scripturally, you find examples of people like Moses saying, where Moses comes off the mountain, and God is just fed up with these people and is going to destroy them. And Moses calls him out. He says, "No, God, you can't do that. What are people going to say when you destroy this people that you've just saved from Egypt? And you can't do that." And so we say, these are people that that we love, and that are our family and our friends. And what does a life in Christ look like for them? What does a grace-filled life look like for somebody that is in that situation? And how can we help facilitate that so that they have a beautiful and a beautiful life with good relationships where they feel close to Christ? Like, all of those things seem to be possible if we don't get in our own way, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
it seems to me like another question is, what would a grace-filled community look like?
Yeah,
Including
absolutely.
that included LGBTQ people fully.
Yeah.
It seems like if we look at our particular community right now, and the position that LGBTQ folks find themselves in, it's hard to say that's an example of gracing, it seems like right now.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a very interesting framing to say, what would gracing look like as community, as it pertains to this issue. And I think maybe there's something creative that could emerge.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. I think it is creativity.
yeah, you write, I love the way you write about the way the gospel informs the law. And, you know, we love Adam Miller's work, and it felt like you really built on this and brought it home in like an everyday kind of way that I think was really powerful. And you know, it just made me think, about all of the ways that I learned about obedience. And I think probably they're really healthy ways that, you know, when you're growing up and you need some scaffolding and some structure, maybe that's really useful. But at some point we have to learn to use this lens of Jesus's New Testament gospel and let that inform the way we see the law. And you really explore what that means and like what flexibility with the law looks like. And I can feel like this very old, young part of myself, like old as in it's been there for a long time, and it's a very immature part of myself that's like, but what about exact obedience and like not being lukewarm and all of these things that make life very simple, you know, that keep it very black and white. The answer is always whatever the law is, no exception. Like this is about commitment and dedication and strictly obedient. And anyway, so I'd love for you to talk about that, and how do you think the gospel sort of gives room for the law to become what is needed, as opposed to a thing that can't be moved or changed?
Yeah. I've read a little bit from Abraham Heschel, who is a Jewish rabbi, and he has some beautiful things. But I kind of growing up, I've heard that, you know, that the Jews had it wrong because they're so focused on the law. And people are thinking of these Pharisees in Jesus's day that are so strict that they just kind of miss the whole point of it. But what's interesting about reading Abraham Heschel is that he is saying, he talks about law in the same way, that the law is something that points us to a certain kind of life with God. And that the rituals and the habits and the liturgies that we practice are meant to draw us closer to God. And if we just do them as an end in themselves, then we are missing out. And I think Richard Rohr said something to the effect that religion is one of the safest ways to hide from God, the safest places to hide from God, because it is in living that kind of life where you are, where the law becomes like a straitjacket, right? Like it so confines what it is that you can do and how you can experience something, that you're missing out on what the law is supposed to be doing for you and how it's supposed to be helping for you. Abraham Heschel has this little book about the Sabbath day that is just beautiful. And Jewish people have been keeping the Sabbath for centuries, and they've thought about the Sabbath a lot. And the way he describes it, he talks about how the air is different on that day, and the food tastes different that day, and it's just has this aura of holiness about it, and the interactions with people are different, and it's just like this beautiful vision for what the Sabbath could be. But I think it's similar in a lot of different kinds of laws, that we keep them in order to learn and to lean into that kind of life, rather than just doing it because that's what helps make us feel safe. So,
and I like the way you wrote about it, because it also makes it feel like, of course, then the law can never be used to decide what someone else deserves. And you point out that Jesus is constantly being asked who deserves the prize, like who's the winner here. That is the relentless question, and he just refuses to do that. It's just like, it feels like that really is something that we're supposed to learn from the Gospels, that it's just never going to be about that. And but I also recognize the ways that's very easy to fall into. It's the most human thing to just need to know who earned it and which one,
Mhm.
who won and what's fair. And
Mhm.
it's uncomfortable and non-dual. And it feels like something that we kind of have to mature into, because it's very unnatural to just believe that we will never be able to tell who wins and who loses, including as we judge ourselves.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's not the way this thing is set up, right? It's not a winner and loser kind of a scenario, but yet we
Yeah.
keep kind of going back to that, or expecting that, or expecting it of
Yeah.
ourselves or other people, that we either need to win or lose, but that's not the game we're playing.
Yeah.
Yeah. We love the scripture about that God is not the spirit of fear. And so often that's what comes up for me. Like, oh, it's always rooted, there's always some fear. Like, I need to know who won and who lost here, because it's calming. It's like, okay, then I'm okay. And
Yeah.
it feels like in so many of these things that we've talked about, when the question is arising out of fear, that really is a tell. Like, that's a tell that this is where this question is coming from. And it's not our highest, wholest selves that is reaching for this answer. It's this very fear-based thing that where God isn't. And I think it's helpful to recognize that when it comes up, and it feels like it's very often the root of these angsty questions.
Mhm.
I know we need to wrap up, but I want to ask you, you write about the church being true, and how you hear that, and what you mean by that. And I felt like it was really beautiful, and it really resonated with me. And I know that that's a phrase that can sting for some people. And so I
Mhm.
would love to wrap up there. And can you just talk about what you mean when you hear that phrase, or say that phrase, that the church is true?
Yeah, I think for me is that the church is true because it points me towards that kind of a life that I'm looking for. It points me towards gracing. There are the structures um and the interactions, and sometimes hard interactions, sometimes that put you out of your comfort zone, that that teach me and lead me and help me understand what that kind of a life looks like. And I recognize that there are other good places to discover that kind of life, and there are people that have been in other faith traditions for a long time, and are also discovering this kind of a life. And I think those are valid, and it's important. But for me, who has grown up in the church my whole life, and has loved the interactions that I've had and learned a lot, um, I feel like it points me to Christ. And so that's how it feels true to me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Love
Thank
that.
you.
That resonates for sure. Well, thanks, Hannah. We covered a lot of ground in this hour, but also not nearly as much ground, I think, as you cover in the book. There's so much more there, and you write about all of it so beautifully. So really encourage everybody to go check out this book. It's a work of grace. I think you're exemplifying what you're preaching,
Yeah.
in a sense. So thank you again, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thank you.
And really, Faith Matters is, I've been a fan for a while. To sort of have my book land with Faith Matters, it feels
Oh.
like Christmas morning. It really
Oh.
does. So
Oh.
I love the conversations that you have and the ideas that you explore. And so, yeah, thank you for all that you do. So
Thanks, Hannah.
thank you.
All right, thanks so much for listening. We really hope that you enjoyed this conversation with Hannah Packard Crowther. You can find her new book, Gracing, on Amazon, or you can purchase it in person at the Compass Gallery in Provo. It's brand new, beautifully written, full of insights that will stay with you, and it's stunning to look at. We think it would make a wonderful Christmas gift. And we would love to hear from you. So leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can reach out at info@faithmatters.org. Thanks again for listening, and remember that you can check out more at faithmatters.org.